going to be talking regarding economics, and we're going to be talking about the goods markets. So let's understand what the good market is, basically. So the good market refers to the relation between two, let's call them entities, individuals, so on. The consumer, so the consumer and the individual firm and the businesses. It refers to fact. This is in a vacuum. We're not talking about leaks and we're not talking about injections. So we're dealing with the consumer and the firm solely. So the consumer earns income from the firm simply because it works. For example, a factory worker or a normal person that works in a for corporation earns money from a firm, basically, an average income, a total income before tax and so on, no leakages, pure income. So they derive an income. Resultingly, consumers then pay back corporations, firms through let's close this so it's clear. Pay one sec. Pay back firms through purchasing goods. For example, I am a household, I am an individual, I work in a supermarket. I earn €1,000 a month from the supermarket, but I go back to the supermarket once a week to purchase my weekly shopping, for example. This is this circle. This is this cycle. Obviously, we're focusing on this cycle solely. Obviously, this income then leaks into foreign investments, savings, and into taxation. But we're not going to talk about this at this moment. So let's move on. Now we have an idea of what we're talking about in the goods market. We're going to be looking at, in this case, uh, demand for goods. Okay, we're going to be looking at this from a mathematical point of view. So we need to understand first and foremost aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is made up of this formula. So Z, which represents aggregate demand, is equivalent to C plus I plus G plus X minus I. What does this mean? Let's zoom in. What does this mean? Z represents aggregate demand is equal to consumption plus investments plus government expenditure plus exports less imports. Imports are things we bring in. Therefore, money is leaving the economy, leaving this cycle up here on the grand scheme of things. For this, to apply this to this closed cycle, which we're going to be looking at since we're talking about the goods market, we're going to eliminate these factors, the exports and imports. So we're looking at a closed market. Therefore, we're going to calculate this equation basically. We're going to work using this equation. So we're working in the closed economy. We're going to focus on consumption, investments, and government expenditure. We're mainly going to be focusing on consumption. We should do it that way basically. Is the main focus. So consumption. Consumption. We know that consumption has the equation C is equal to C representing consumption is equal to C naught, or let's do C naught. We're going to put it like this: C naught, CO is going to be C naught plus C1 YD. No, YD. What does this mean? The consumption refers to consumptions of individuals. Consumption is equal to C naught, which represents autonomous consumption. What is autonomous consumption? Consumption refers to the consumption we need to have, the bare minimum consumption. For example, regardless of how much money I make, I have to eat X amount of food and drink X amount of water per month. Therefore, I have to pay X amount of money per month to be able to live. That is autonomous consumption. It is something stationary that doesn't change regardless of income. C1YD refers to the marginal propensity to consume in relation to disposable income. Disposable income is the money, the income we have after um, after taxation and so forth. The remaining income we have. C1 is the marginal propensity to consume. So as YD increases, as disposable income increases, how much we consume, how much we consume is dependent on our marginal propensity to consume. It's the relationship between how much we consume in relation to the disposable income we have. Okay? So this can be shown using this graph right here. So let's get a pen. We would have the y and the x-axis. We would have a line going like this. Sure, it's not very straight, but so on. This point over here, oh, let's try and make it a bit clearer, is C naught. Simply because it can't start from this point. This point is a zero mark. Or autonomous consumption, yes, can never be zero because we always have to consume at a certain level. This level then is drawn above the zero mark on the y-axis. So let me label the x's just to make sure it's clear. This represents income and this represents consumption. So consumption has to be at this point, regardless when income is zero. So when income is zero, autonomous consumption has to be at this point. This graph represents this equation. Okay? Therefore, we can say that the marginal propensity to consume, which remember is the the consumption in relation to disposable income. Let's label this YD actually. Instead of this, we label it YD. We can say the gradient of this line, gradient shows the C1 value, the marginal propensity to consume. The greater the gradient, the greater the marginal propensity to consume is. Okay? Now we understand this, we can start to break down this equation into more parts so we can continue talking about the goods market. So, let's break down YD first and foremost. So, disposable, this income, or in other words, YD, is equivalent to the income you would receive less taxation. So we can write this equation then in this form. Now we understand what disposable income is. Let's implement this into our equation. C consumption is equal to C naught plus C1 autonomous consumption brackets income less taxation. It's the exact same thing, just with YD expanded. Okay, so now we're dealing with this because of this factor here. Pretty straightforward so far. Pretty straightforward in entirety. This can then be open up. We can always open up the brackets. So we have C consumption is equal to C naught plus C1. Remember the marginal propensity to consume. C1Y simply because it is C1 opening the brackets times income less subtract C1T. Okay? So this is what we can say is the equation. Now, moving again, remembering we're talking about the goods market. So we're dealing with this equation. We formulated this equation since the goods market is a closed market. We're talking about C plus I plus G. We found out that the C is equivalent to C naught plus C1Y less C1T. Therefore, we can implement this into our equation over here. We implement this into here. Resultingly, we get this following equation. So we can say that demand, which is Z, is equal to consumption, which is consumption. My spelling is absolutely shocking. I presume that's correct. Consumption, which is this equation here. We can write that in there, but I'll rewrite it. Which is this equation here. So C naught, let's do it in caps. C naught plus Y C1 less T C1 less interest. Sorry, plus sorry interest plus investments plus government expenditure. Okay, so this is our equation now. Z is equal to this equation plus I plus G. Okay, now we need to introduce some factors. Okay, so that's our demand equation. Okay, that's the demand equation. Let's write it clear. For goods market demand equation. Okay, is this. We now need to introduce this in an equilibrium. When we're talking about equilibrium, we're talking about production is equal to production is equal to demands. Demands equals production. Production being supply. Okay? Production has the value Y. We denote it with Y. So Y is equal to demands, which you know is Z. Okay? This is the most important thing. So since this is the case, we can say that in the goods market, Y is equal to C naught plus C1T. Cool. No, C1Y we should do first. Less C1T plus investment plus government expenditure. Okay, so we're saying since we're talking about equilibrium now, we're not talking about demand only, we're talking about equilibrium. The point at which production equals demand, supply equals demands. We are saying that supply is equal to the demand equation here. Okay? Pretty straightforward so far. You would note in this equation here two things. Well, one thing really. That there are two y's. Well, anyway, there's a y there. This is simply because if you think rationally about it, income is equal to production. Therefore, we can move this figure over here to the other side and we can simplify the equation. And we end up with this equation. Pretty straightforward. We end up with 1 minus C1 is equal to C naught less C1T plus I plus G. Okay? We can simplify this further by dividing by 1 minus C1. So when we do this, we end up with Y is equal to 1 all over 1 minus C1 multiplied by C naught plus I plus G less C1T. Now, this is important. This is equilibrium in the goods markets. Okay? In the goods market. Follows this equation. Okay? What do we have in this equation? We have a multiplier here. Okay? And we have this part of the equation here, which is autonomous spending. So we have the multiplier times autonomous spending is equal to supply. So supply is equal to the multiplier times autonomous spending. Pretty straightforward. All we've done now, one sec. All we've done now, all of this leading up, leads towards what we can graph. We can now graph this and plot this into a graph. A pretty straightforward graph. In this graph, we will see this. Look, let's make a nice, neat one, since my work recently has been absolutely shocking. Here, nice one here. Another line going that way. And here we're going to draw the equilibrium. Okay? So we're going to draw the demand. We'll draw the demand curve. And the supply curve. Okay? This point is the equilibrium. So that point is this equation. Okay? This one, this line here, represents the production or income. And this line over here represents demand. So what are we saying? All this math above here shows this graph, proves this graph. This graph is based on the maths. So what do we understand from this? This point here is the autonomous consumption. And we're saying that demand is met by supply at this equation, at this point here. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. This is basically what we understand by the goods market. That goods demand is met by supply in this manner, using this mathematics, using these graphs. Okay? So this was my lesson today. Next week we will talk about something else. If you have any comments or questions on the video, please put them down below and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.